At the present time, we are living through the final stages of Christian civilization. The destruction of Christian civilization has been a long process. It began with the Protestant revolutions 500 years ago. And there they decided they would reject Catholicism, the teaching authority of the Church, the various mysteries of Catholicism, the sacraments, and especially the Eucharist. But after a time, people decided that it was not enough to reject Catholicism. They had to reject all Christianity if they were going to build a new humanist civilization. After a time, they realized that there was no point in holding on to a Christian God if you didn't have a Christian morality, a Christian dogma. And so they decided to get rid of God. They would build on an atheistic foundation. As Jesus says in the Gospel, "Whoever rejects me rejects the one who sent me." And then, after a time, they began to realize that we have to go even further than rejecting God. We have to reject humanity. We have to reject rationality. And that is what we are living through at the moment, the rejection of humanity and the rejection of rationality, of reason. Vast numbers of people in our own time, vast numbers of the most educated people in the world, the most educated people in history, are going through life not knowing where they came from, not knowing where they are going, the purpose of their lives, or how they are to achieve it. And not only do they not know it, but they're not even interested in asking the questions. We are asked to believe that two men can marry each other, and we have to change the whole meaning of marriage in order to accommodate their demands. And we think this is rational. In Ireland, the government has decided that a man becomes a woman if he gets a certificate to say he is a woman. That's all he needs, a certificate from the government to say he is a woman. And we think that this is rational. The question is, where do we go from here? First of all, we have to realize that we cannot live in such a culture without being affected by it. And so, large numbers of Catholics no longer go to Mass on Sunday. They no longer worship God. They are no longer filled with the hope of eternal life. In Ireland, the people, for the first time in any country, the people voted to allow the killing of unborn babies. It was the most evil day in Irish history when Irish people voted 2-1. How could we believe that it is to the benefit of mothers to be able to kill their unborn children? What kind of rationality is that? if our civilization was even half rational, many of our politicians and our journalists would be locked up, either in prison or in lunatic asylums. And yet we kind of think that these are the trendsetters for our society. Many of those who voted to allow the killing of unborn children are Catholics. Many of them were here in Medjugorje. We cannot live in this kind of a culture without being affected by it, and we need to be constantly trying to purify our own thinking and our own behavior. So where do we go from here? Well, there are really only two possibilities. Either we continue on the path that we are traveling along, on this attempt to build a civilization without God and without hope. The English physicist Stephen Hawking on one occasion said that human beings are just a chemical scum on the planet Earth. In a way, that is completely logical for an atheist to say. If we're going to build a culture, how can we build a culture on the idea that human beings are chemical scum? How can we build a culture on the idea that death is the end of everything? That there is no hope of eternal life, there is no hope of eternal happiness. It is like trying to build a skyscraper in a bottomless swamp. It's just impossible. The other alternative, and it's the only alternative, is to build a new Catholic civilization. A civilization based on Catholic dogma, based on Catholic morality, and based on Catholic hope, based on love. A civilization based on our understanding of the dignity of human beings as children of God. Children of God that share responsibility for their own salvation. This is the only basis on which we can begin to build a new Catholic civilization. We, at this point then, while we are at the end of the old Christian civilization, we are at the beginning of a new Christian Catholic civilization. We are makers, builders of this new civilization. It will take probably centuries to bring it to full completion, to spread it throughout the whole world. But we have to begin now by the way we live, by a faithful living of the gospel, by a faithful thinking of the gospel, by thinking like Catholics. Being a Catholic is the most wonderful thing in the world. We are so used to being Catholics, most of us. We have been Catholics since we were born, practically. And we take it for granted. But it is the most wonderful thing in the world to have the hope of eternal life, to know that we are loved by Jesus Christ, that we are called to be united with Jesus, that we are called to eternal happiness with God. Why aren't we on fire to proclaim this gospel to all people? And yet so often we are afraid. We are afraid. What are we afraid of? Bishop Francis spoke about Boko Haram in Nigeria and the Christians having to suffer there, their lives put at risk. And yet they are prepared to live the Catholic faith, to attend Mass Sunday after Sunday, knowing that their lives are at risk. That is what courage is. We ourselves, in our own situation, we are afraid to even say that we are Catholics. We are afraid to stand up for our faith in case somebody might criticize us, in case somebody might think that we were Holy Joes or Holy Marys. And what odds if they do? Not the first mistake that I've made. But for us here in Medjugorje, we talk about coming to Medjugorje to recharge our batteries. An American author said, "We are not here to recharge our batteries. We are here to be trained for war, for Christian warfare. That our calling is to get out there and share our faith." Pope Benedict used to say, "We have no right to keep such a great joy to ourselves." And so we come here, we receive the graces that are here. We are trained for battle, and we go back home on fire to share the gospel in our own families, in our own communities, and ultimately to the whole world.